Mitch Marner just a couple of points away from 100 on the season. Welcome into Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. Make a play Canada's choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies. Wrapping up game number 79 of the regular season, a 7-1 beatdown of the Montreal Canadiens, and joined alongside by Paul Hendrick, who has been traversing Europe, has been in Spain for the last little while, and is now in Amsterdam. And wow, what can you say about that place? But what also can you not say about the Toronto Maple Leafs, who just put down a beating on the Montreal Canadiens without Morgan Rielly, without TJ Brody, and it really just looked like Montreal had no chance this time.
No, and, I get an Amsterdam reference, and I'm going to steal something from you, but Amsterdam and the back of that Montreal net did resemble a bit of a red light district. Yep. And I got to partake in the one, being the Montreal game at Toronto tonight, and just an interesting observer just touring Amsterdam for the rest of the stuff here. What I look forward to, yes, they got through it tonight. Ilya Samsonov got through it tonight when there was an injury scare earlier in the game. Now with the Leafs, with 3 games in the next 5 nights, all on the road, all of them meaning absolutely nothing as to what you do in terms of load management and where you play your key guys. You don't want them going into the postseason rusty next Monday or Tuesday. So get them 2 games. And if I'm to sit out any of them, I think the game in Tampa is the game you sit out. I mean, Tampa may do likewise as well. But just make sure you get through this week healthy and ready to go next week.
Yeah, we're definitely going to go into that. Why Ilya Samsonov was put in that position in the first place. There were a lot of shenanigans, I guess, cap shenanigans that I had to write about today, but nothing that is not permitted. So, good thing I have a math background that I'm able to kind of transpose it and explain it here on the podcast. So we'll get to Ilya Samsonov tonight, but Mitch Marner going for 100 points on the season. He has been rested. There is load management, and it's kind of a tricky balance. But, he was red hot tonight. Thought he might have been able to put on more of a show here tonight. Sheldon Keefe afterwards saying that he could have had 105 points with the way he was playing. But here's Ryan O'Reilly, a veteran who's seen it all, talking about Mitch Marner's game tonight.
Yeah, I've been around the game for a long time, but nowhere close. For him to do that, it's a incredible thing, and obviously we hope he can achieve that. But what impresses me most is the intensity that he plays at and the plays he makes. Every shift he's making something happen, and defensively, offensively, it's been a very special season for him, and he's an incredible player.
Yeah, nowhere close. That kind of surprised me. I knew Ryan O'Reilly had not necessarily been one of the top point getters in the league, but I would have thought at some points he would have been in the 80s or 90s. But the Stanley Cup winning season is his best output, 77 points in those 82 games, 28 goals and 49 assists. But certainly Mitch Marner is a skilled weapon. There was one play he made in that first period when he's just defending there and getting around the guy, and he literally did it on one leg. He did the poke check. A Montreal player's coming right at him, and on one leg, he's able to hop and stay on his foot and advance the play that way. And it just kind of spoke to some of the defensive ability that Mitch Marner is able to make, and we've seen it. He was coming off that season-high 3-game pointless streak to come back and really just explode for offense there. Really, the way Mitch Marner plays that game at both ends of the ice is going to be the big difference for the Maple Leafs in the playoffs this season, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And look back to the 2015 draft in Florida, and the Leafs in a position, obviously, to get Mitch, to get Dylan Strome, to get Hanifin. Babcock wants Hanifin. Mark Hunter said over his dead body, we're drafting Hanifin. Arizona takes Dylan Strome. Stromer's having a great year in Washington, and great on him. New contract. But things fall into place, and the Leafs get a franchise player. And you'd have to wonder as to how things might have been different had Mitch gone to Arizona. Well, that didn't happen. He comes to Toronto, and he is a cornerstone in what Toronto is going to be able to do in terms of a possible championship. And we'll see eventually where Legends Row might be. But if he's to stay with this franchise and continue to do what he is doing, he is certainly going to end up alongside some of the great ones and names being mentioned, like Doug Gilmour and others that Mitch kind of embodies and looks like. But what a turn of fortunes it was 8 years ago for the Toronto Maple Leafs to get Mitch Marner as opposed to, say, the two other players. And he's just absolutely fantastic. He's Michael Jordan on skates, if you will. His ability to see the ice and plays before they develop is just an incredible thing. You get to see him in practice every day. You get to see him in every game. And it's a privilege for you. It's a privilege for all of us to get to watch him on a regular basis.
Kenny, let me ask you this. So tonight, Ryan O'Reilly is playing on that second line today with John Tavares and William Nylander, a bit of a different look at home and on the road when he came back, and they tried this before when he got hurt. They had Tavares back in the wing here at home, but on those road games, they loaded up a second line, which didn't really quite work with William Nylander, John Tavares, and Mitch Marner there, and Ryan O'Reilly at third line center. But do you think for the playoffs, what we're seeing here is when you have the second change, Ryan O'Reilly up on the second line, but when you don't have the second change, he's on the third line to spread out the wealth and the depth there on the three lines? You think that's the game plan the Leafs are going with here? It certainly looks like that.
Yeah, it certainly does. And why wouldn't you go there? We've talked about the plethora of riches that Sheldon Keefe has at his disposal. He has options. And why not go with this on? Going to be interesting to see how they balance out, the three lines. That fourth line obviously is going to remain intact for the series against Tampa. And why wouldn't it be? But just how the top three lines sort of sort themselves out with all that talent. Calle Yarncroc has certainly figured into things. O'Reilly gives the third line, obviously, a bona fide, really productive, hardworking center. But to get to your point, if you've got a chance to stack those two top lines in certain points of the season, and again, with the second change, I think you've got to go for it. And this is what Kyle Dubas has provided his head coach, an opportunity to have this depth of talent. So you're going to use it to the best of your ability. And without a doubt, I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And it certainly makes sense. Any championship team that you've seen go to the Cup has a strong third line center option. And I don't think you can really go wrong in Ryan O'Reilly if he ends up being there more than he is up at the second line. But certainly when you have that first change, you can certainly load up those top two lines and get the favorable matchups that way. And so it looks like that's locked in. The other thing we will talk about, not tonight, but we talked about before, is the only other thing that looks locked in right now is that fourth line of Aston Reese, Kampf, and Lafferty. And we will talk about Kampf in the next segment because of some skill that he had on display, which I think surprised a lot of people. I'm sure you as well, but we'll get to it a bit later. Let's talk about probably one of the biggest stories going into the game and was part of the game as well. And that was Ilya Samsonov starting in this game. A lot of people, myself included, thought this looked like a Joe Wall game for a lot of reasons. But last night, everything starts with a very subtle moving Joseph Wall down to the Marlies and calling up Wayne Simmons, who got into the lineup tonight. And then, Matt Murray was not around. Sheldon Keefe says Matt Murray looked like he could play tonight. Had not been on the ice. But kind of a weird one. And then Jett Alexander is signed to an amateur tryout contract. A lot of this was just to kind of part the seas and open things up so they can be in an emergency situation that if they want to sign Matthew Knies for this season, before the playoffs begin, they can do it. But it comes with a risk because Samsonov had to come in tonight. And in the second period, he was pretty sore when he had to slide across on a 2-on-1 and hit the post pretty hard. Here's Ilya Samsonov breaking down what happened when he was a little bit hurt in that game.
Semis never break, yeah. Everybody knows this. I almost broke in post. Yeah, but it's okay. I feel good. Just a little bit squeeze and feel like tight. but nothing crazy. We have a best doctors, best staff. These guys, we're doing this and we fix it.
Were you thinking about coming out? Was that a conversation? We saw you talking to the trainer there.
About what?
Were you thinking about coming out when you hurt yourself a little bit?
You know, like I know I don't feel bad, yeah, and I know I will play. Like I didn't stop play, but with more conversation, we need to check after a period how's the power, how's everything. Everything is good. I'm just doing my job again.
Well, there you have it. So a crisis avoided for Ilya Samsonov, who comes into the game, and Jett Alexander is the backup there, and he gets into this game with about 1:10 left to go. Sheldon Keefe saying that it wasn't his decision and that it came from above. When asked who exactly made that decision, he said, quote, "That's not important, but certainly the U of T goaltender who was on an amateur tryout for a lot of the reasons to try and kind of fit Knies in, gets in." And he talked about what that whole experience was like, getting that tap on the shoulder.
First thing was hopefully they win the D-zone draw and then get the puck out, and then nothing comes at me. But yeah, pretty special. It was pretty nerve-wracking, obviously, but something I'll remember. So,
what was today like, start to finish?
Kind of, normal day, and then got the news that they need me, and came and kind of just prepared like as normal as I could about a normal hockey game, and just tried to soak it all in once I got here. So, yeah.
Have you had a chance to check your phone since you got off the ice?
Yeah, I just took it off airplane mode and scrolled down for a little while. And yeah, obviously, probably it'll be a busy day on my phone.
So that's Jett Alexander's second time he wore NHL equipment in this building. Last year, when Darcy Kemper was hurt, he actually dressed as the backup for that team because he was the E-bug in that game. Didn't get in, but certainly now getting that tap on the shoulder was certainly a fun experience. But we can talk about how wrong or right this decision is, Henny. If Ilya Samsonov does get hurt, certainly a lot of people are kind of pointing to why is this happening. Matt Murray is already kind of done and looks like he may never even play a game again. That like an excuse that he might have been able to back up seems a little crazy. But what did you make of the crazy day as you were trying to follow along here and keep up with the weird cap shenanigans going on?
Well, we're kind of on eggshells. As I'm going to include myself as a Leaf fan. I am a Leaf fan, and you just want to get through the remainder of the season as healthy as possible. That said, Dave, he does have to play some games. You just can't sit him out for the rest of a week and a half and hope he's going to be ready for the first round of the playoffs. So that way, guys have got to play. You've got to hope that they all emerge through it healthy and ready to go. And as I've said, I'm sure we're going to see him at least one more time before then and now. For Jett Alexander, what a great name and what a great opportunity. Looking on Twitter, Kevin McGran of the Toronto Star quoting Chris Weidman of the Montreal Canadiens, thinking it was a horse crap move on the Leafs' part, maybe shaming Montreal. Well, Montreal, you're down 7-1. Just look in the mirror. There's no shame. And you know what? If that decision came from somewhere else, I'm going to assume it came from Kyle Dubas. And why risk anything? Get him off the ice. You don't need a collision at the net. You don't need anything like that in a 7-1 game. So maybe we see him against the Rangers. And back-to-back games coming up on Monday and Tuesday. We're going to see him in at least one of those three games. And maybe it's Tampa. I'm not sure. It's just, I don't know how to handle this as best they can. That's what those guys get paid for. But he had to play at some point. So maybe tonight on home ice isn't a bad way to do it. You go in not thinking injury all the time, but the risk of that's going to be there no matter what. And regardless of the importance of a game, it's like playing guys in an exhibition game. I remember Matt Stajan one year played all 8 exhibition games. They wanted to get a good look at him. And you go, why? Like, is it really necessary? We'll see what they've got in mind here for Samsonov, given what that left leg's going to feel like, a groin or whatever it was. but he's going to play between now and then unless the situation's rather tenuous, and then maybe you sit him out for the next 10 days before he gets his next start. I hope it doesn't come to that.
Totally with you on the fact that you got to get him in some games. I just would have thought in a short period of time here that this would have been like a good West day, and then you get him into one of those back-to-backs for sure. And then possibly the last game against the Rangers, solely because there is like 5 days remaining. There could be like a gap of 5 days between the last regular season game and the first playoff game, depending on schedule, right? We know there'll be at least a 4-day gap, and it could be as big as 5. So yeah, I kind of thought Samsonov is going to get 2 games there, but I thought it would be a different 2 games. And you know what? If Joseph Woll was available and they didn't have this looming Matthew Knies thing around, and they would have gone 11-7 and done those kind of things, then perhaps we would have seen Joseph Woll in tonight. But I'll digress on that. It is kind of an interesting one because, the Maple Leafs are in that situation where, as you mentioned, there's not a lot to kind of risk here, but you have to ride that line. Mark Giordano had some blocks in this one. He's still playing pretty hard. Not going to let the fact that it's regular season change his mindset and his habits, and everyone's kind of have to, make sure they stick to those kind of things. So I am with you on that. Okay. So someone who I didn't think kind of had it in him, I was kind of surprised. David Kampf trying the Michigan in the first period. This was something else. It really got the crowd going. It looked like it was just kind of blocked on the way by a defender, not from the goalie per se. But that would have, they want to talk embarrassing things. Maybe that would have been more embarrassing for Montreal to go through than the Jett Alexander thing. I don't agree with that assessment at all, that putting in an e-bug at the end of the game there is a knock on Montreal at all. Like, that's trying to do right by someone and give them an experience of a lifetime because he's there. But look, the way Montreal season's been, I'm not surprised that they're going to be ornery. But let's hear from Mitch Marner, who's always had a lot of praise for his PK partner in David Kampf, and his thoughts on number 64 demonstrating that Michigan skill.
Yeah, we were loving it on the bench. I wish he pulled it off. That was great, but he had time. He can do it.
Yeah,
so.
they know it. I mean, they always talk about Kampfer being one of those guys who can just, demonstrate that skill when necessary. I remember on the breakaway in one of those playoff games against Tampa last year, he scored and got really fired up. Probably the most personality I had seen from Kampf, just given the, he's not really an emotional guy, but in that moment, it was pretty big for the Maple Leafs. And so the guy, as Sheldon Keefe has said, he always scores important goals, it seems. And so that would have been something else. But what did you make of, I know you're a little bit more old school, Annie, what did you make of the Michigan attempt from David Kampf?
Hey, we are in the business of entertainment, and in a game that really meant nothing to either side and was wide open, and you get a chance to do that, Dave, you're going to do it. And listen, he's a skilled guy, but he knows going into the postseason what his role is going to be. I don't know how many goals that line is going to score, but they're going to be very effective down low. And you know what? Maybe they do score a bit, because we saw how great they were against the Boston Bruins this past week. So no, as old school as I am, I enjoyed it thoroughly. You get a chance to do it, you go for it. And regardless of what the other team thinks in terms of disrespect and whatnot, I'm fine with it, and good on him. He's a hell of a hockey player. And again, he had an opportunity tonight to have some fun, saw the chance maybe to put it in. And had he put it in, well, of course, he'd have been going on Legends Row. And why not try that?
Yeah, it was something to see. I think we talked to Austin Matthews about if he was going to try it at some point. He's certainly a candidate for it. We've seen him work on it at practice every now and then. But I guess he has more of a target on his back than maybe someone like David Kampf does. It was certainly interesting to see when he flexed it. And I was kind of joking in the press box that the fourth line's really rolling to the point where it's starting to get to their heads a little when you see David Kampf trying the Michigan there. But certainly I don't think he's going to try that in the playoffs. That's just a guess, like an educated guess. But yeah, the fourth line of Zach Aston-Reese, David Kampf, and Sam Lafferty have been rolling. Like it's really been that whole identity of what the Leafs were looking for in a fourth line that could match up with the Tampas and the Bostons that had not been a strength of theirs in the past. And I truly feel like they've got that now, that it's really going to be more on the Stars getting it done in the fourth line. I don't think the fourth line versus fourth line matchup is going to be much of a problem for the Maple Leafs this season.
No, I agree. And, historically, the last few years, there was always a drop off from that fourth line to the first line as the lines rotated. And now there isn't. In fact, you've got a motivating group out there to get the first line back out there. And there's an actual connection from one to the other. It's called line balance. And, the Leafs now finally have it, and it's taken some time and a few trades. And, you acquire these guys at a certain point in the season to get together. And as we talked about, post-trade deadline, pre-playoff training camp, and now, the coaching staff's had an opportunity to see which guys work well together. And that fourth line is really a smiling point for all of Toronto Maple Leaf hockey fans, knowing that they've got a legitimate, hard-digging group that's going to make life miserable for the other team. In fact, they're going to be as entertaining to watch, I might add, as some of the other lines are. And we know historically, especially against Tampa and in Boston before, whereas the top lines have canceled each other out, the bottom pairing lines, or at least third and fourth lines, may have a opportunity to tilt a series in Toronto's favor. And that fourth line is certainly very capable of that. It's just not a group of three guys that Sheldon will be throwing out there just because the other lines need a rest.
Right. And I thought it was really telling, even though it wasn't really that much of a meaningful game the other night in Boston, that fourth line got more even strength time than any other line against the Bruins. And they kept it close. And to me, that was them passing the test, because they got deployed every time to start a period, to do all those other things, and to hold themselves well in a game where there wasn't really a lot to give. That's where that fourth line has to be out there. That replicated Game 7 to me. How many times have you seen Game 7s like that? I mean, you know it closely with someone like Nick Paul, where you see a Game 7 and it's like a fourth line or third line goal that for the other team scoring it, that when the Leafs opened it with a fourth line goal after there wasn't really much of anything and the offense isn't there and the Stars aren't scoring. That's what you need in the playoffs in those type of games that had been lacking from deciding games from the Toronto Maple Leafs in the past. So it was nice that they had a data point there that they can point to against a really good team. Granted, it's the regular season. You don't want to get too carried away, but I thought it was a great job from the fourth line there in a really tough team, really the model of the NHL right now in the Bruins, for them to get it done. So on that note, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the Matthew Knies situation, and also hear Sheldon Keefe's thoughts on Erik Gustafsson, who had 3 assists in his return after a long layoff to deal with a family matter. We'll get into that, and we'll also talk about just the impression that he made on PP1 tonight with Morgan Rielly and TJ Brody resting. You're listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. Rink-Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game. And welcome back to Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's choice for free casino games, poker tips, and sports odds. David Alter and Paul Hendrick with you, and it is time for the Bodog line of the day. And going into this game, before the Leafs decided to do a little bit of a subtle switch on PP1, where they had Ryan O'Reilly in there at PP1 and William Nylander down to PP2, Ryan O'Reilly was a plus 620 to get a point. And so if you made that bet, you definitely collected. And hopefully you got in before the word got out that Ryan O'Reilly was going to get PP1 minutes, and certainly PP1 delivered tonight. No Ryan O'Reilly, no Morgan Rielly, I should say. So it was Erik Gustafsson getting the reps in, and we're not going to read too much into it, but there's a lot of mixed conversation about Ryan O'Reilly's role, Morgan Rielly's. Well, I knew I was going to make that mistake as soon as Ryan O'Reilly came in here. But Morgan Riley's role at PP1, where he kind of fits in, I think the fence pair, it's kind of sucked, but there's a lot of chatter about PP1 and who should kind of be there. Eric Gustafsson put up a lot of points with the Washington Capitals playing TP1. He comes back in here, and the Leafs go with 4 power play goals on the night, and 4 for 6 on the evening. Here's Sheldon Keefe talking about Eric Gustafsson's picture-perfect performance coming back from a layoff.
He's a very confident guy, and he's got a high skill level, very smart, good sense. But yeah, he's missed significant time, so you don't know how that's going to affect a guy, especially a guy that's new to our team. But definitely was important for us to get him in here tonight, and as it turned out, he got lots of touches, and I thought he did a good job both 5-on-5 and on the power play.
Yeah, it's really a good performance coming back from a layoff. Granted, it is Montreal; you don't want to get carried away, but there was a reason that the Leafs picked up someone like Eric Gustafsson, someone who is a little bit more experienced than Sandin, even though Sandin might have more upside potential down the road and had more protection. That's why the Leafs got a first-round pick as part of that deal. And I want to get your sense on the little bit of time you've seen from Eric Gustafsson here, because he's not a lock by any means to be in here, but at PP1, it just looked like that power play was moving, not just because of him, but maybe because of Ryan O'Reilly in that spot too. But what did you make of everything with Ryan?
He's a veteran guy, and I had to look down the stat sheet. He leads all Maple Leaf defensemen in scoring. In fact, Dave, he's the 5th leading scorer on this hockey club, given what he accomplished, in Washington. But he's got 42 points. Morgan with 40. Morgan's played obviously less games. But for Eric to come into the game here tonight, he'd missed 7 consecutive games with a great deal on his plate, especially emotionally with, the physical state and challenges his daughter and has been going through. And hopefully all is going to be well as they continue to manage that situation moving forward. But it must have been great for him to get back into a game, just to think about something else. And he looked right at home. And I think he might be a factor, especially if power plays are going to be a dictating factor as to how a series might go. I know it was Montreal, regardless, 3 assists. Is an impressive feat, and a Leaf power play that went 4 for 6 went into the game 4th in the league. I think Montreal's penalty kill was 28. So you don't want to put an asterisk on any of this stuff, but it was a impressive veteran performance, and I think will earn him some significant time at some point in the Tampa series. The other guy that stood out was Liljegren. You think he was eager? I mean, 5 hits. I think he had a point to prove as well, both those guys. So good on both Eric and Timothy, and I'm sure they're going to see a little more time as well this week as the team gets ready and rests a few more guys. And Mark Giordano, 1948 time on ice, that was tops on the Leafs. Sheldon did a great job of balancing the minutes of everyone. Not a single player, if I'm correct at the stat sheet, played 20 minutes or more for Toronto tonight. And that's what you want to do from here on in as you head toward the postseason.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused by that, actually. I don't think I ever recalled seeing 6 defensemen all finish the game at under 20 minutes. Like, that's kind of, I don't even know how it's possible. But I guess so, with all the power play time that they had, that would kind of explain it, because you're only deploying one guy out there. So I guess from an even strength point, Eric Gustafsson would have been far less, but because he got 4 minutes and 10 seconds on PP1, Mark Giordano getting 3 minutes and 27 seconds on PP2. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, like, it's hard to deny Gustafsson's contribution tonight. Some of that could be Ryan O'Reilly in that bumper / sometimes net spot. So I can see them trying a game with Ryan O'Reilly, with Morgan Riley at PT1, with Ryan O'Reilly in that spot. And if the power play doesn't click and they get Eric Gustafsson in, maybe that's the way he gets into this roster, because power play has been a problem for the Leafs in the playoffs. And, if production is an issue, you might have to look to find a way to get Eric Gustafson 8th, if that's 11-7 to do it. That's why the Leafs have been practicing it. But it's kind of interesting because they got a lot of different guys, and injuries are going to happen. But if they don't, all the guys who are sitting, they all have different kind of specialties that you kind of have to wonder from a game-to-game standpoint, who's coming in and who doesn't. It's going to be a really interesting question that Sheldon Keefe is going to have to try and figure out over the next few days here. Okay, let's get a little bit back into the Matthew Knies stuff here. He's playing in the championship game. As we're recording this, just finding out that Quinnipiac wins in a thriller 3-2 in overtime to win the national title. So that's a heartbreaking result for Matthew Knies. Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts talking about a lot of the different possibilities here tonight about how if Minnesota were to win, there might have been some thought that he would want to go and celebrate with his team back in Minnesota for a little bit. I can imagine now those plans might have changed now that they lost. Matthew Knies is in Tampa. It would kind of make sense to kind of join. And look, the Leafs played Jett Alexander in this and used a bit of a loophole here where they can dress short so they can temporarily call up a backup that doesn't count against the cap in Joseph Woll afterwards and have enough money left on for Matthew Knies. I've got to think now, given the sour end to all of this, that Matthew Knies joining the Maple Leafs sooner instead of waiting and going the ATO to then join them in the playoffs is now imminent.
Yeah. You think of another Hobey Baker candidate and another Matthew is Matt Fratton. And I forget the situation, but I know the Final Four was in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Michigan had upset, his squad and North Dakota. But there was a passport situation where they had to drive, or his mother had to go home, pick it up, bring it back to him. They flew him into Toronto. Brian Burke wanted something on a terrible Leaf season, another terrible Leaf season, to show the fans that, hey, look what we've gotten. And Frats, I think on 2 hours sleep, made his NHL debut on the final night of the regular season against the Montreal Canadiens and really looked good. He was just going on adrenaline. And I think Knies, as disappointed as he will be, at least has this to look forward to. And like the Fratton situation, I think we're going to see good things from him in the remainder of the season as he gets indoctrinated into the National Hockey League. But losing to Quinnipiac the way they did is going to eat at him for the rest of his life. That'll be a void that just won't go away, given how good that Minnesota program is. And really heading into that third period up 2-1, not able to seal the deal. But he can put that behind him because now he's coming to the Toronto Maple Leafs with an opportunity to impress, at least in the short, and possibly make this hockey club next season out of training camp.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting now. The path is paved for him to join the Leafs pretty much immediately. I can imagine this was probably like an optimal situation if the Leafs wanted to get him into some regular season games, not necessarily saying they wanted this for him, but he can just turn the page faster in this situation and get some games in. And then if needed, you're not throwing a guy into a playoff situation when he has his first NHL experience, because that could be pretty overwhelming, no matter who you are at that spot. And that's no disrespect to Matthew Knies, but it's not a slam dunk that he's going to be a difference maker with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like he's got all the tools, great hockey IQ, foot speed. I keep hearing might be a bit of an adjustment for him. It certainly was when he was at Dev Camp last year. We'll see how much he's worked on it. But it is heartbreaking when you decide to not join a year or go pro a year early because you really want to win a championship for your alma mater there. And to come up that close, a goal overtime away when your team was leading for most of the game, that hurts. That really hurts. And maybe for him, if he does get thrust into a spot, he can use it as fuel to kind of help push the Leafs forward in the event that he gets selected in the playoffs, or he's needed because of injuries or whatever the case may be, that he can. Yeah. So, that quote, by the way, that they'll get what they deserve in a few weeks. Habs Chris White. That's pretty sour.
It's terrible.
Wow. I'm just reading that now.
Yeah.
That's pretty sour. Like, okay.
Hey, dude, you lost 7-1. And Dave, I'm talking from experience. I've covered Toronto Maple Leaf hockey clubs, have been in that situation consecutively for a lot of years. It is what it is. You deserve what you deserve. But now the tables have been turned, and this is a good Toronto hockey club. They've worked hard. Toronto's fans have suffered long. They deserve this. And you know what? You play well enough to lose. Montreal did not play well enough to lose, but their big goal is to get a guy named Connor Bedard. And I said it before in this podcast. I hope they get him, because it will be a hell of a rivalry. And I'd love to see him go to Montreal just because. And because, the Habs deserve it. I mean, it's been a while for them. They've really struggled in that regard. Regardless of where he goes, I'd like to see Montreal get him. But on Weidman, and they'll get what they deserve. Like, how old are you, guy? Like seriously.
Well, rink-wide Vancouver is certainly going to have a field day with the Bo Horvat quotes, because it seems like the end of the season is really bringing out a lot of the spicy quotes from players. Bo Horvat telling Shannon Hogan on the broadcast while being interviewed in the arena about where that experience ranks compared to some of the others. And he says, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of, well, it sure beats Vancouver. I'll give you that one for free in front of the building. So, whether you're on the right side of it or on the wrong side of the playoffs and all that other stuff, the spicy quotes are certainly coming out. And I apologize to the listeners for jumping topics, but when I just saw that, I thought it deserved another talk in that regard. So on that note, before we wrap up, we really should talk about Wayne Simmons here, because he does get into it. He hasn't played a lot, had a big fight early on. And then Michael Bunting is the recipient of a very vicious cross check, and Wayne Simmons comes to his defense. They kind of give each other like the bro five in the penalty box. A couple of Scarborough kids just kind of looking after each other. And, Wayne Simmons been a pro given the situation there. You had a lot of family members here tonight because you don't know what the future holds. It could very well have been his last regular season home game as a Toronto Maple Leaf. But what have you made of how Wayne Simmons kind of handled what's been kind of an odd situation for a guy who, before this season was never really signed to the Marlins? He didn't actually go, but, really wanted to make sure his career kind of stayed at the NHL level.
He's just a complete pro. He's been a pro right from day one. I think I've told the story on this podcast before that, his first visit to Toronto, he bought a lot of tickets for family. Second time in Toronto, he bought no tickets for family because his father told him, this is your money. Hang on to your money and look after yourself. Don't worry about us. You've earned this right. You do not have to buy tickets for the entire family like you did the previous game. He played .854 tonight, had 4 hits and 9 penalty minutes. And, Mitch Marner saying, hey, it's, incredible, basically. And I'm paraphrasing. He still scares the SHI, out of other players. And that makes that entire bench feel good. And good for him, for going up against Edmondson. He's a tough, dangly character. He's so strong. I don't think, maybe it might be the end, because I just don't know where he fits in unless injuries need him to go in. I think the Leafs have enough toughness in their lineup, regardless of who they're playing. And I don't think Wayne is going to fit into what the Leafs are trying to achieve. But on a night like tonight, and there's still 3 games to be played, we're going to see more of him. But if this is the way he's to go out in his final home game in Toronto, he went out on fire. And especially, after the first fight going off the ice and the ovation the crowd at Scotiabank gave him, I'm sure that made him feel great. And it was just great to watch it here in Amsterdam, just to feel that vibe coming from the building and for him as he went off the ice. Good for him. Fantastic career. He's been great to deal with as a member of the media. we always love talking to Wayne, and to see him do it in a Toronto Maple Leaf uniform here the way he did tonight, fantastic.
I think I might have mentioned this when I was working at the Fan way back when, the very last year that that Toronto hosted the NHL Awards in 2008. There was a charity ball hockey team event as part of that. And so we had, every team had a high prospect on their team, and ours was Wayne Simmons. And I couldn't believe how good he was for our team there. And that was like my first real experience. Didn't know a lot about him at the time, but certainly it was kind of crazy to kind of see someone there and then end up here. And, that first season during the pandemic year, he was really good for them, had that broken wrist. He was playing second line minutes for them at that point. And then it seemed like when he came back from the wrist, he just really wasn't the same player after that. So it's a shame there, but certainly has always found a role, and he's much loved in that locker room. You can see it, especially with the way Bunting embraced him in the penalty box after Simmons had his back. On that note, that's going to do it for another episode of Rink Wide Toronto. Make sure you rate and subscribe on all your favorite podcast platforms. To Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, the place to go to make a play for free casino games and sports odds. Rink Wide Toronto, pre-game, post-game, every game.